All right, welcome to another edition of Battery Corner. My name is Ryan Austin. I'm CEO at Lyteflo. And we have here again the esteemed Battery Alex, our director, head of battery intelligence at Lyteflo. Alex, how you doing?
Doing well. Yeah, this is the fourth episode now.
Fourth
Starting,
episode.
yeah.
Consistency is what builds results, right? And so that's why if you consistently watch this every week, you're going to get results. So let's jump right into it. Enough banter. So today we're going to be talking about supercharging, charging fast, charging slow, things like that. So I want to start off with supercharging, fast charging, also known as DC charging. There's been a lot of conversation around like, hey, don't worry about supercharging. It doesn't degrade the battery. Some people say it does degrade the battery. So does supercharging really degrade the battery? And should I be worried about supercharging?
I mean, the short answer, okay, well, that's kind of like two parts of a question there. So the first part, does it degrade the battery? The short answer is yes, compared to like AC regular charging, so-called level 2 charging.
The charging
or
at
level
home.
1.
Level
Yeah,
2 is the home
exactly.
charger thing that you would install at home. That's level
Yeah.
2. Maybe we should get some nomenclature out.
Yeah,
Level 1
exactly.
charging is you're plugging into a regular outlet, just like my computer is plugged into right now. Level 2 charging is plugged into a like dryer outlet, if you've ever seen one of those, or a dedicated dryer type line that you've installed in your home. So it's like a thicker cable which allows more electrons to flow through, and you have like a unit at your house, and that's kind of, and the cord that's plugging into your car is thinner than a level 2. That's kind of also how you could identify it if you're at a public station. And then a level 3 charger is DC fast charging, and it's a big old cord that's fairly heavy, and that's the fast charging level.
Yeah. Well, those are there's going to be the big box you plug into, like when you pull up to a charging station, and like a big fan kicks on when you turn it on and stuff, because it's high powered.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. So we got that terminology out of the way.
Yeah. So when you use those DC charging, those those can reach like, I don't want to just throw kilowatt numbers at you, but you'll see them when you look at the specs of an EV, like how many kilowatts it can take, which is just how much power it gets. So how fast it's charging, how quickly the energy is going to flow into your battery. And those can hit hundreds of kilowatts, whereas at home, you're normally in like the tens. So
Kilowatt is the rate at which electrons can flow. Like a lot of people don't even know that.
well,
Right? Well, maybe not exactly.
The rate is
common.
current, but you basically can think about it as how much energy is getting put into your battery is what we want. So because what you see is a battery capacity is measured in kilowatt hours. So that's like 1 hour at 1 kilowatt is 1 kilowatt hour of energy. So the more kilowatts you can,
like,
yeah.
Think of it as kilowatt hours as like liters or gallons if you're new to
Exactly.
this, right? It's like how many kilowatt hours can I fit in my battery? How many kilowatt hours am I using on this drive is just like liters of gas or gallons of gas.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So basically, the higher the kilowatt number you can do, the quicker you can charge your battery. So the problem is, though, the faster you charge your battery, the more it heats up. And inside the battery, we discussed before that the anode and the cathode are these layered materials. And the problem is they run out of space, basically. So if you're putting lithium into these layers, initially it's empty, right? When your battery's fully depleted and you're trying to charge it up. Like the carbon and the graphite is just ready to accept lithium. But as you keep going, as you put it in, then the problem is lithium can locally preferentially go into certain locations and cause what's called lithium plating, which is we've also discussed on an earlier episode, but the short of it is it can harm your battery. It can cause like fires if unregulated. So that's why anyway, we have to limit the charging power. Why you can't just charge in like 1 minute, basically. On top of melting all of the conductors inside your vehicle, like all of like the metal like wires and stuff that connect everything together. But so basically, the faster you put lithium into a material, the quicker it expands, the more it can react with the electrolyte inside. So there's just a bunch of different reasons why that does degrade the battery more. But the difference is, so the biggest study here is this Geotab study that we have on this. And they found that it's about 1.5% degradation per year versus 3 if you charge fast charging less than 10% of the time versus primarily using fast charging. So it definitely increased. So that's double. So like that sounds scary, but at the same time, 3% a year, you're still looking at like, it's going to take you over 3 years to get to 90% of your capacity and range.
Yeah.
So it's not really like the end of the world, but yeah.
And that's only supercharging. That's like you're
that's like you literally never plug it in level 2. That's like they didn't give the details, but they may not be limiting to 80%. They might be going to 100% on those charges. Like there's a lot of unknown factors. So, but that's like our best rough estimate on a large set of cars so far. Okay.
So short answer is supercharging does, because it's a faster charge, there's more heat on that higher kilowatts going into your battery. It does have the effect of a chemical process with the battery that will degrade it faster. And it's also not something that, you know, you need to be like crazy concerned about.
Exactly. Even not worth worrying about, for sure. It's a short answer.
Yeah. If you need to supercharge once in a while, you certainly don't need to think about this.
Exactly. And the other thing that's not really talked about too much too is the charging power that's advertised is often the peak charging power. Mm-hmm. So if you see like, oh, this car can take 250 kilowatts, if you've ever plugged into a level 3 charger, you've seen that it's not constant the whole time. So that's just, you might get that for like 1% of your charge, if that. Some of them, like it's longer, some is shorter. You can look up online, if you just search the charge curve, that's what you'll want to call it, for your vehicle. You can look up and see there's a bunch of websites that have done like independent studies where they've just plugged in the car, they just log their session, and then they'll just show that graph. Now, it's not always going to be the same because it's temperature dependent, but basically the long and short of it is the manufacturer knows that there's limits to the battery, and they want to balance the degradation versus charge rate for convenience versus you having like a good user experience in the long term and warranty claims and all of that. So it ramps down as you charge.
The car is doing that.
Yeah, exactly. So this is a communication between your car and your charger, basically. The car dictates to the charger how much energy it wants, basically. So it's different for every vehicle. So if you plug in a different vehicle, even an aged vehicle may ask for different power than a new one of the exact same model, just because it's constantly self-checking and seeing what can I accept, what can't I accept, and then it asks the charger for that. There's a bunch of like safety limits and stuff. So
this is really important for new EV drivers and dealerships who are selling to new EV drivers, because I know that, you know, my father rented an EV last week and he was surprised even that not all the chargers charge at the same rate, and even knowing of level 2 and level 3, because some people assume public charging is public charging, not knowing that like they're not all the same. Many public chargers are level 2, which means they're slower chargers, 9 kilowatts maybe speed, kind of like a home charger.
Yeah,
they just assume because it's public, it's what's that?
Yeah, and even within the levels, it's
sure,
like,
level 3.
They're not defined. Like you could have something that can give 50 kilowatts. You go to another charger, it can give 90. You go to another one, it gives 120.
Yep.
You don't really. There's not like a fixed thing. So that also depends on that too.
Yeah. So you mentioned something around charging to 100%. I'm not sure if we've covered that before, but maybe we talk about that. Where I mean, I was fast charging at a dealership a couple weeks ago, and I wanted to charge to 100%. And what ends up happening is that the last 10%, you know, you're charging at 40, 50 kilowatts. It's going great. You're feeling awesome. This thing's going to be done fairly soon. And then you get to 90% and it drops to like 6 kilowatts or something like that. So tell me, should we be concerned about charging to 100% as it relates to degradation, and then tell me about the charge curve and the variability of like when we get to 90 and so on.
Yeah, so like we'll start with why the charge slows down. So we kind of already alluded to that. It's just that as the cell charges, lithium is taking up the positions in the carbon, basically. So as you fill up the battery and get to a higher state of charge, there's fewer and fewer spaces for the lithium to go. So now you become limited by the lithium has to kind of find a way to occupy those last spaces, which takes time. And if you charge too quickly, the lithium just goes, okay, I'm not going to look for a space. I'll just deposit right on the surface of the carbon. And that's lithium plating. And that's the bad thing that can happen, that if it happens to a very severe degree, which it's engineered to not happen, so you don't have to worry about that. But it can cause a fire basically, because it punctures the separator. To a lesser degree, it just means there's dead lithium in the cell, so now your capacity goes down quite a bit. So that's why it has to taper so dramatically. So if you try to go 200 kilowatts when you're at 95%, you're going to plate lithium, and then that's just very problematic. So that's why it goes down significantly. There's another very minor reason, and that's because often the BMS likes to measure everything properly at the high end of the charge, because the high voltage limit's very important to the safety and the degradation of the battery. So you want to switch to basically there's two kind of modes in charging. There's the current based charging, which is where you say I'm going to deliver this much power per second, basically. Like I'm going to give this many electrons per second. And then there's a voltage hold, which is you have a target voltage, like let's say it's 4.3 volts on the cell, and you don't want to go over this voltage too high, because if you do, this can also cause plating and it can damage the battery itself, and it's a risk. So you don't want to, when you charge a battery, you put it at a higher voltage to maintain the high current. But then that can cause, if you do that at high state of charge, you could end up overcharging your battery, which can also lead to fires and like severe degradation. So there's a few different safety reasons, basically, why you have to limit the current. So if you see a voltage, if you look for your voltage curve for your charging, it most of the time it looks just like this. So you start at your peak at around 10% probably, and then it just will either as steps or as a nice curve go down to at least less than a quarter of the speed, if not lower, as you get up to like 80 to 90%. So yeah, that's basically what happens with your charging. And then to answer your other question with charging to 100. So yeah, there's a lot of like fear out there. Everyone says, like, it's even in the manuals of your car often and stuff, or even on like different websites or whatever. When you go to the dealer, everyone says don't charge to 100% if you want to keep your battery in top condition, which is not entirely true. So from a chemical standpoint, that is 100% true. If you leave it at 100%, it's going to degrade quicker.
If you leave it at 100% or you charge it to 100%?
Both. Like any additional time spent at 100% will cause it to degrade quicker than if you only went to 80. Like, that's just like chemically, that's what's going to happen with your battery. Now, the exception is, though, batteries are not just like a pure chemical system in EV. It's a whole engineering thing. So the problem is you have a BMS that has to monitor your battery. So when you charge your battery, your BMS is constantly checking in, like what's the voltage, what's the current, counting the electrons.
BMS is?
The battery management system.
Thank you.
Yeah, good. Yeah. Yeah, for those who didn't follow the last episodes.
Yes. We're gaining new subscribers every week. So, yeah.
So if your battery management system needs to literally count the electrons and monitor the current and the voltage, it gets a little lost along the way, because everything's calibrated when the battery is at rest. Like, that's when you can make the best measurements. So when you're charging the battery or using the battery, like the voltage is shifted relative to when it's at rest, and it's difficult for the battery management system to accurately track your battery. This is especially prevalent in LFP batteries, which tend to be in your standard range vehicles. So, what I'm getting at here is for LFP batteries, their voltage does not vary much during the charge. And the voltage changing during charge is one of the big things that the BMS looks for when it's trying to accurately characterize your battery. So if you don't charge it to 100, the voltage doesn't change very much and the BMS can drift. So for the LFP batteries, it's actually recommended that you charge it to 100, like even weekly would be ideal. The main thing is don't charge to 100 at high temperature and leave it at 100 at high temperature. That's
High
when,
temperature meaning
like,
outside it's hot.
yeah, like if it's going to be above like 30 degrees Celsius, or I don't know what that is in Fahrenheit for
90, call it 90
yeah, let's
degrees
say 90
Fahrenheit or
Fahrenheit.
something.
Yeah. If you're going to hit those temperatures, especially if it's sitting in the sun, then being at a high, like it's funny, it's not talked about that much, but actually having your car physically warmer at a high state of charge will cause it to degrade quicker.
Oh, interesting. That's
Yeah.
never talked about.
Yeah, so it's not going to be like
So-
double the rate, but it's definitely going to have an impact.
So a couple questions. One, why is it important for what does battery management system drift mean? And why is it important that it not drift? Why do I care about that if I'm a regular driver?
So the battery management system is what's telling the car how much power it's allowed to draw, how much it's allowed to charge, all of this stuff, and it's used for predicting your range. So basically, when you look at your car and it says you have 80% battery remaining, that's because the battery management system was tracking your battery the whole time. But the problem is, without doing a recalibration or a reset, that can vary by a few percent. So it might say 80 when it's actually at like 78 or like 83 or something, which day to day isn't a huge deal, but it can cause weird things to happen, like your range will suddenly drop or suddenly increase or something while you're driving. It can also cause premature power limiting. This is in the more severe case. If you get down to a very low state of charge and it turns out it's actually lower than the BMS thought it was, then your car will be limited in its like dry power or charging speed. The other thing is for state of health monitoring. So if you care about looking at how your battery is degrading over time,
Like with Lyteflo?
exactly, then it's going to be off for that. So a good example is Tesla has a self-test feature where you can plug it in and you tell it to do a test. We have tested several Teslas now, and every single time the state of health of the battery has gone down by at least 1% up to 3% that we've seen, just because the cars aren't normally charged all the way down and all the way up. So doing this recalibration, the battery actually had 3% less capacity than the BMS thought it did. So it's a minor effect, but if you let it go unchecked for too long, it can cause like some edge case weirdness, especially with your range and your charging speed.
Got it. So LFP batteries, first of all, how many dealerships or sellers of EVs are telling customers that they should charge once in a while to 100% if they have an LFP battery? The number is 0, I'm sure.
Yeah.
And if I do have so two questions. One, if I have an NMC battery, should I charge to 100% also to recalibrate the BMS or anything like that?
So yeah, it's still helpful to do it, but you can do it less. So basically, LFP is kind of like flat, and then it goes like up if we're talking about how the voltage behaves with the state of charge. So you really got to get up there. Where NMC is kind of sloped. So it's sloped and then goes up. So it's like it can kind of do better, basically. It has lower drift over time.
Okay, so a little bit less often.
Like monthly would be
Sure.
perfectly ideal. And then you don't have to worry about drift in the long term. So your state of health number is going to be fairly representative of the actual battery. And then, you don't actually cause premature degradation.
Right. And if I'm in a warm climate, should I then not charge to 100% or just do it less
So the
frequently?
key there is only charge it to 100% right before you need to use it.
Okay. So
So
just don't store it at 100%.
don't let it sit at 100% when
Got
it's
it.
hot, basically.
Got it.
That's the
Got it.
main thing. Yeah. Or like if you're going to go away for like a month, you can actually, it's actually better to discharge your vehicle down to like 20% or like 30% and then leave it like that. If it's not climate controlled or anything.
I've also heard like leaving it plugged in is good. If you're limiting charging to 80%, I guess.
Yeah, that like it shouldn't matter. Like it'll just turn
matter.
off, and then if it self discharges, it'll top itself up. That kind of thing.
And
yeah,
should we worry about degradation charging to 100%?
If
Frequently,
you do it
or
frequently,
just like
like if you do it frequently,
Yeah.
like especially in warmer climates, it'll definitely have an impact. So because basically, a lot of people think degradation for batteries is usage based only or mainly, and that's not even the case. Like if you just have a car sitting there at 100% or like even just at 50% for years, you're going to lose capacity because there's chemical reactions that are always happening in your battery that are slowly depleting it and slowly breaking it down. So we call that calendar aging, if you care to learn more about it.
That's why a vehicle that is older, but that's why the odometer is not necessarily indicative of
Exactly.
degradation. You could have an older vehicle that has 20,000 miles on it and a newer vehicle that has 60,000 miles on it, and perhaps they have the same degradation, or who knows? It
Yeah, the
depends
older
on-
one is often worse. So like
yeah, the
it's,
older one is often worse. You have this lower.
yeah, especially if
Yeah.
you're using it in that 20 to 80 range when you're not really stressing the materials by like forcing lithium in or taking it all out. Like it really doesn't affect the capacity, like the degradation that much to be using it in those
In
regimes.
20 to 80, if you're using it within 20 to 80, less degradation.
Exactly.
Right.
So so that's why they say don't charge to 100 and all the time and stuff. But it's okay to do it once in a while. But
Right.
that's the main
Right.
thing. So that's when the calendar aging takes over. So yeah,
Calendar aging.
So you got to pay attention to the year, the odometer, how much it's been fast charged, all of these things. But conveniently, you just have to, if you can get a device that plugs into your car that can tell you the current capacity of your car, you don't have to worry about any of that because you can just know what the answer is.
So to land the plane on this, most often you're going to want to be charging to 80%. Once in a while, maybe once a month or twice a month, go ahead and charge it to 100%.
Yeah.
Just don't leave it at 100% for a long period of time. And
Exactly.
that's best practice.
And a little side note, when you're buying an EV and if you care about charging time, that's important to you, look at like time from 10 to 80 or 20 to 80. Don't just look at the peak power because that's very transient. Like you're only going to see peak power for a little bit.
Great. So just looking at time here, I think we'll leave it there. I think next time would be interesting to talk about charge times and how different cars have different charge times, or maybe we'll do that right now. So tell me about why cars have different charge times. Why is it not all of them kind of charging the same based on what charger there is plugged into it?
Yeah, so charging, well, really it all comes down to the size of the battery, the chemistry of the battery, and the engineering of the vehicle. Those are kind of your three big pillars there. Because if you plug everything into a level 1, like if you just plug it into your wall, they'll all charge at the same rate because they can all accept that amount of power, no problem. So then you're only limited by the size of your battery. So most people care about the DC fast charging. So that's limited primarily based on the voltage of your vehicle and how it's configured, as well as the engineering of all like the high voltage contactors and everything inside of the car to manage such a high power. Secondarily, it's about how the modules, like all the like a battery in an EV is a collection of modules typically, and within each module you have a bunch of individual batteries. So it's like this hierarchy of batteries inside batteries, and
Battery cell, module, bunch of modules is a pack.
that's your pack, exactly. So it also depends on the architecture within the pack, because essentially you can put to get a high voltage, you can put your cells in series, or you can have more capacity at a lower voltage and having them all in parallel. And the thing is, there's different current considerations that you can drive in different heating and cooling situations depending on how you configure it. So the main thing to look for, like the short answer is, a lot of EVs hover around either 400 volts or 800 volts internally. The 800 ones can handle a much higher charge, like a much higher charging rate, like
Kilowatts.
higher currents. Exactly. So a higher power. And that's because it's basically the higher voltage you have, the less current you need for the same amount of power. So it's this old P equals IV for anyone who took high school physics.
I took high school physics, but I certainly don't know that equation.
So it's so basically current is what melts your connectors and makes everything like it can cause heating up and things like that. So if you want to reduce the current as much as possible, so to do that you have to increase the voltage. But to increase the voltage, you have to have better isolation because it's now a little bit more hazardous to work with. So when you have the 800 volt batteries, they need a lower current for a higher power. So that's the long and short of it. So just look at your battery architecture, whether it's 400 volts or 800 volts, and that's mostly what you want to watch out for.
So basically, net, the higher voltage that the car is, the faster it can get energy into the vehicle.
Yeah, so that's for the big jumps, and then like there's going to be like OEM to OEM, and that's like specifically how the batteries are laid out with inside the pack, like and how what chemistry is used, because those also factor into the equation. But we don't need to go too deep into it. It's just at the end of the day, you just want to be looking at your like 10 to 80, 20 to 80% charge times, because people will log that, they monitor it, and then like that's going to be your kind of best real world approximation, because you're going to see like the peak is going to be 300 kilowatts for another one and like 200 for another one. You can assume that the 300 will charge quicker, assuming same battery size. But again, it's peak, so you can't know exactly. Like, it doesn't mean it's going to be 50% quicker because the peak is 50% higher. Right. It could be 10%. You don't really know.
Right.
Yeah.
Is voltage a better indicator of that?
No, voltage is again the same thing. It's just you don't know, because a higher voltage gives you access to higher power, but not necessarily, because it depends how it's engineered. So at the end of the day, like the best thing is just people have gone out and tested it. You get the hard numbers. You look for a nice little Lyteflo widget that tells you what was the charge time, and then that's why you should be comparing that vehicle to vehicle. That's what to look out
So
for.
in the Lyteflo tools that we would add to a dealership site, we show charge time at level 3 essentially, and that's what you're going to be interested in primarily.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. Well, we'll leave it there today. Thank you, Battery Alex, for sharing your battery wisdom with us on another episode of Battery Corner, and we'll see you next time.
Yeah, anytime.
All right. And we're out.